Good morning, everybody. This is James Cannell here. Can you guys all hear me? Just making sure that the audio is crystal clear. Does somebody maybe say yes in the chat window there for me? Perfect. Thanks, everybody. Okay. Well, good morning. I am here to talk about listing presentations. Now, the reason we picked this topic is because there was a lot of people requesting talking about listing presentations, which is fabulous because that to me indicates there's a lot of you out there doing listing presentations, taking listings, and talking to listing clients, which is fabulous. Now, the one thing that I want to really get across today is the structure of the listing presentation. So I'm not necessarily going to be giving you any one specific listing presentation. The objective of this course is to give you a structure of a listing presentation. Basically, these are all of the key ingredients that you're going to need to include in your listing presentation. And it's a framework that you can use to build your own listing presentation out of. So whether you have tons of available resources in terms of graphic design or print material, or whether you're running a bit of a leaner operation and you're just getting started, either way, a listing presentation needs to have certain key elements, and we're going to talk about what they are. So the agenda for today is welcome and housekeeping. With respect to housekeeping, there is, from my perspective, no problem with asking questions mid-presentation. I'm perfectly okay with that. So if you have a question that you want answered while I'm moving along, just put it in the chat window and I'll answer it as we go. I don't mind having questions as we proceed. Course overview, we'll get to that in a second. And can I share the link to the slides? Absolutely, yeah. There's going to be resources and links shared at the end of the presentation. There's also a survey portion, so it's very important that you please do take out a moment to fill the survey. The reason the survey is so important and so handy is because it really helps us know where to steer the content in the ICON program. So the presentation that I'm teaching this morning, listing presentations, and then I'm teaching a presentation directly after this in the same location if you're so inclined, on handling objections. Both of those courses came from requests of agents just like you guys, filling out surveys saying, hey, this is the kind of thing we'd like to learn about. So when you guys all speak, we listen and we try to create content that's helpful for the agents. So please take the time to fill out the survey because it really does help us. And then Q&A at the end or sprinkle it in between. First things first, let me introduce myself. So I'm going to introduce myself here just to let you know that you guys are in good hands today. I'm in Western Canadian real estate, so I have built out the team model of real estate, very similar as outlined in the Millionaire Real Estate Agent for those of you who have read the book. And I've got my primary team, the first team that I founded is in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. I'm currently sitting in my office in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, and we've got a location in both main cities. Those are our flagship locations, and then we have a presence in a couple of other of the Western Canadian cities. I've been in real estate for 15 years. About 8 of those years were as a solo agent, and during my time as a solo agent, my last 3 years as a solo, I was in the top 10 realtors in my marketplace for the last 3 years in a row, and that's out of about 3,000 realtors by production. And then we started focusing on the team model. The last 2 years I was with EXP, or with REMAX, I should say. We were the top team in Edmonton in REMAX, and then when we switched to EXP, we've been the top team in EXP in Alberta for the last 2 years. So we're definitely industry leaders. The last 2 years in a row, I've hit ICON. The first year it took me 5 months to hit ICON. This year I did it in about 3.5 months. So we're definitely doing a lot of volume. We're listing a lot of houses. We're selling a lot of houses. I know I'm not here talking about teams per se, but I do specialize in teams and team building. So if any of you out there are thinking about that sort of thing, don't be shy. I'm happy to talk about it too if you want to send me a private message on the workplace. And in terms of what I like to do in my spare time, I love the mountains. I like going out for dinner with my friends and socializing. I'm definitely past those party days, but I still like to get out and about. So nothing beats going to a nice restaurant and sitting down for a nice long meal with a couple of cocktails before and after as far as I'm concerned. and I spend pretty much all of my free time, summer and winter, going down mountains as fast as I possibly can, whether it's on skis or a mountain bike. So for those of you who are from Western Canada, about 1.5 meters of snow has fallen in Whistler, BC over the last, 3 days, 72 hours, and another 30 centimeters on the way today. So I'm going to be heading up right after this and taking advantage of my season pass because days like that don't come around very often. Now, in terms of the course overview, this is going to be what we're talking about today. There's 3 elements to a good listing presentation from a high level. There's the pre-presentation, so what you do before you even meet with your potential client. There's the presentation itself, and then there's the follow-up to the presentation. Now, spoiler alert, I'm not going to spend too much time on follow-up because if we do things correctly, we should never have to get to follow-up. We should be closing our listing at that presentation. So one of the mindsets I always have is that every listing presentation I go into, I'm going with fresh paperwork ready to sign, and my primary intention is to leave that presentation with a signed listing agreement and a client. So that's part of the mindset, whether you're sitting down for a buyer's meeting, whether you're sitting down for a listing meeting, you really want to make sure that you're focused on getting the business done and earning the client. So let's talk about the pre-presentation. A pre-presentation is very, very powerful because it helps set the tone for why that client should choose you. It's setting expectations, it's educating the client on who you are and what you do, and to be honest, it's not something every agent does, and so it's a really nice thing to get yourself differentiated out of the gate for a client that might be interviewing multiple realtors. If it's a client where the business is basically assumed because they're a friend, family, referral, repeat client, it's a nice package to help set their expectations and help guide the process. Either way, it really paves the way for a great listing presentation, and it paves the way for you to maximize your opportunity to earn the business. So we're talking about the elements here. The elements of your pre-presentation is what we call the pre-listing package. Now, remember, there's more than one ways to get this done. So some people, they do a physical drop-off, and this typically resounds a little bit better with the older demographic. They like to have something in writing, they like to have a paper pamphlet that they can flip through, etc., etc. Some people, myself included, send a virtual package. Some people do a preparation phone call. So we're going to talk about each of these things and know that there's no right answer when it comes to sending this information. What matters is that you're doing something and that you're sending something to get the initial relationship built. So if you've got the resources to graphically design and print a nice package, all the power to you, go for it. It shows the initiative that you physically visited their property to drop something off. However, if you're going to email them some materials, we actually use the CRM, and for those of you that are using KV Core, we have a campaign built in KV Core. It's a short campaign, and it sends multiple emails to the clients leading up to the listing presentation. So instead of one big package that they have to read all at once, it just kind of gives them multiple touch points in the week leading up to when we get to go see them. So I find that works very, very effectively for us. And then a preparation phone call. So let's talk about what needs to exist in your package, either the physical package or a virtual package. So for this package, the kinds of things that you want to include in your pre-listing package is a brief introduction to yourself or your team, your track record, what you do professionally. If you're a newer agent, don't fret, that's okay. I would still lean on whatever professional credentials you have, and it's your opportunity to leverage the brokerage. So, talk about how you are an agent with EXP, talk about how EXP is, the fastest growing brokerage in North America, and some of the other benefits and features of being a part of that brokerage. Again, it's all about building that professional credibility and starting to build that relationship. I put a little bit of market information in my pre-listing package. So this might be, the tax assessment for the property, or it might be some comparable sales that are in the property or active listings in the neighborhood, that sort of thing. I also put a little bit of information about what to expect from the listing process, just so that they know, okay, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to show up at your property. We're going to talk about it. We're going to review our marketing plan. We're going to come up with a marketing plan together. We're going to come up with a price together. And then ultimately, we're going to take action on getting your property listed for sale. So I'm setting the expectation. That I'm coming there to sign paperwork, put your house on the market, and do this business. I really want to plant that seed early on so that there's a understanding that that's how we are going to proceed, barring any strange or exceptional circumstances. So it's all about priming the pump for business, as it were. The other thing that some people like to include with their listing package is, let's just brainstorm a couple of things. Actual copies of the contracts and paperwork so that they can have them pre-reviewed to sign. Or some people like to put in previous sold listings from the last few months to show off the body of work and say, hey, this is this is an example of what we've got going on, and here's some previous listings we've sold. As you can see, here's what they're selling for in relation to market value, etc. So these are the kinds of things you want to put in your listing package. Again, it's all about available resources. So if you don't have a ton of previously sold sales, maybe reach out to your mentor through EXP and see if you have a couple of sales of theirs that you can use, and just say, hey, you know what, this is my mentor, this is how we operate, etc., etc. So, the advice to the newer agents is leverage the connections that you have to help build that professional credibility. And to the more experienced agents, just strut your stuff. Maybe throw a testimonial in there. These are the kinds of things that are all going to help. The last piece right in the middle there is the preparation phone call. So I like to chat with my clients, and the reason I do is because I want to ask them a few important questions. I would say the most important question to ask them, besides a few qualifying questions, just when do you want to sell, what's the game plan here, et cetera, confirming the appointment to come see their property. I want to know if they are interviewing any other realtors. Now, there's two distinct schools of thought on how to proceed, but this information really allows you to set yourself up for success strategically. School of thought number one is that it's always best to go first. Now, the reason that some people like to go first is because they're ready to go in for the kill. They go in for the hard close. They do such an amazingly great job with the presentation that the client signs off on the listing presentation and cancels the meeting with the other realtors. Now, with respect to my personal philosophy, especially kind of in the more Canadian context, most Canadians, most people don't really resonate well with quote unquote pushy style sales. And so I find the risk of going first and going for the hard close is that if you're not successful, often it turns off a potential client because you kind of come across as pushy. So my personal philosophy is that while there is a chance you might earn the business by going first, I'd say the probability of turning the client off, from my experience, is a little bit higher than the probability of earning the business in your first sure shot. And so I actually like to go last. I find the probability of success is extremely high if you go last. Now, the reason for that is that the clients have already made up their mind that after they interview every available realtor, they're going to make their decision. So you're catching them right at their decision-making moment by going last. In addition to that, usually the interview process is a little bit fatiguing. So the clients, they start the process saying to themselves, hey, you know what, I want to interview all these folks. It's going to be great. We're going to make a good decision. By the end of the third interview, they're like, oh boy, these realtors are all very similar, and we are, we're getting tired and we just want to pick somebody. And so as long as you show up and wow them with your listing presentation as the last person, chances are they're going to pick you. So that's my recommendation. I like to go last because you are in the right place at the right time to be selected, as long as you do a great job. Now, if your client says, hey, no, I wasn't thinking about interviewing realtors, should I? You know, there's always that concern that, uh-oh, what if I just plant the seed that they're going to interview somebody when they weren't originally planning to? I would say no, I was just curious, but you know, we've been friends for a long time, or you know, I'm so-and-so's referral, you know, you're in good hands. I just kind of brush it off. I'd rather know and act accordingly than not know and get surprised. So it's always a good question to ask. Now, before I move on to the next slide, a question said, where can we get a PLP, pre-listing presentation template for EXP? I'm pretty sure that in Workplace, there's going to be some shared resources in there. But I would defer to Judy potentially on that, or if anybody else can chime in. I know that EXP agents are very, very sharing. So there's probably on the Workplace forum a place where it's been shared quite a few times. Now, the next part about our pre-listing is preparation. So what do we do to get prepared? First thing is your paperwork / your leave behind. So when I show up to a listing, like I said, I want to show up with paperwork ready to sign. I want to show up with a blank templated listing agreement because my objective is to end that conversation having earned the business. I'm not there to give them a chance to think about it. I'm not there to disappear off into the afternoon. I'm there to earn the business. The other thing is your leave behind. So similar to your pre-listing package, if you're so inclined, you can build out something that explains who you are, reminds them of your service, maybe a couple of previous listings, just something that they can touch back on to remember who you are. Now, again, that assumes that they're not going to be signing a listing presentation. So my leave behind is actually information more to the tune of tips on staging your home. How do I get your home ready to list? That sort of stuff. So my leave behind content is really geared towards helping them achieve the maximum dollar for their sale. So that's all prepared. I have a nice folder with paperwork ready. Again, if you're working with limited resources or limited time, number one thing you want to print is all of the paperwork you need to fill out and sign to get that property on the market. I do a bit of market analysis, so I know enough about their home to do some research so that I can have a bit of an idea of what's going on in their community, what's going on in their neighborhood, what the trends are. These are the kinds of things that are good pieces of information to have when you go to the listing presentation, because you're going to want to know, what's the average days on market, for example, in that target location. You're going to want to know what the sale price to list price ratio is in the target location. This helps you set realistic expectations for your client and advise them on what this process is most likely going to look like. The next thing I do is a little bit of property and client research. So I want to know about their specific property. I want to know, what I can find out about it, whether that's pulling the title, doing the tax assessment, looking at a previous listing on MLS. Whatever I can go into this meeting equipped with in terms of knowledge and information, I want to go in. I also do client research. Now, in this day and age, it's really easy to do some client research. We can check out Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, etc. It's nice to know who they are, what makes them tick, what their priorities are, what's going on with their lives, so that you can be sensitive to what's going on, and you can be ready to have a conversation. So, for example, if there's some sort of life event going on that's not particularly positive, you don't want to accidentally swerve into that topic in an insensitive way, having known better just because you did a minute of research. Conversely, if they got a family, or to use myself as an example, if you know that their hobby is skiing, well, you can kind of steer the conversation towards that direction, so you can build a little bit more rapport and talk to them about the things that are important to them and that they're passionate about. So the more prepared you are, the more you know heading into the meeting, the higher your probability of success is going to be. No doubt about that. Next, we're going to talk about the listing presentation itself. So this is what happens when you show up. Now, this is where we're going to, again, be talking about a skeleton. I'm going to give you a checklist of all of the things that need to happen in that listing presentation and the general order that I personally think they should happen in. But what it looks like, how it's formatted, how you roll it out, that's completely up to you. Whether you want to do this by having a really nice PowerPoint presentation, whether you have a printed binder where each page represents one of these check stops in the conversation, whether you have a printed pamphlet or folder. I personally try to keep it simple. I like to have all of my resources available on my laptop. So the way that my presentation works is I show up with my laptop with all of the resources that I need available, open and ready to go. So I have Chrome open with different tabs open for the different pieces of information that represent the different stops in my presentation. The reason I like to do that is because my presentation is always 100% to the day, up to date, because I'm not printing materials and then using them a year later or something like that. So it really helps me stay up to date, and I find that having information ready in real time, the clients really appreciate that. So let's talk about the listing presentation agenda. These are the 9 checkpoints along the way in any listing presentation, and I put them in a very intentional order. So this is not in a particular order, this is in a specific order. And we're going to talk about why the order is the way that it is as we roll through it. So what I'll be sharing with you all today is that I actually just print a nicely formatted meeting agenda that I bring with me, and then the client has a copy of the meeting agenda, I have a copy of the meeting agenda, and it just helps me walk through these 9 steps. And then I have my laptop open so that the resources and pieces of information that are pertinent at each step, I've got those available to show them as they come. So again, it's not a PowerPoint presentation, it's not a pamphlet, it's actually just a meeting agenda that helps guide the flow of the presentation. And the reason for that is that different clients are going to want to focus on or need more information about different parts of the presentation. And so I don't want to have necessarily a cookie cutter presentation that spends too much time on something that really isn't that important to the client. So the 2 questions are, will I be sharing the slides and whatnot? Yes, all the stuff will be shared at the end of the presentation. The link will be in the chat window. And then how long is my presentation? I try to keep it to about an hour, and that includes getting to the property, touring the property, and signing all the paperwork. Now, if the house is a little bit larger, sometimes it can take a bit longer, or if the client has a lot of questions, it can take a little bit longer. So I usually book an hour and a half, but my objective is to be in and out of the house within an hour. So let's talk about what the key points that you need to hit on a good listing presentation are. So number 1, introduce yourself professionally. Now, you may notice that at the beginning of this presentation, that's actually what I did, is I introduced myself professionally. And the reason I started the presentation with that, and the reason I start every presentation with that, is because it establishes credibility. So when I started this presentation by saying I've been in the business as long as I've been, I've grown teams, I've been in the top percentage of realtors, that helps you put your mind at ease to say, hey, this is someone I should be paying attention to, this is advice I should follow, this is an expert, and it made you a lot more open and receptive to all of the ideas that I was about to share. You want the exact same thing to happen with your client, because there's points in the presentation where you're going to give them advice that you really want them to follow. Advice regarding pricing their home, advice regarding getting their home staged, advice regarding how you're going to market the property. If they don't trust your professional credibility, then there might be a point of skepticism at that point in the presentation. And that's the last thing you want. You want your client to follow your advice and to trust your opinion, and that is what helps you get through the presentation in a smooth way without bumping into too many objections. So whether I'm dealing with a complete stranger or a friend from university, I say, you know what, the first thing I want to do is introduce myself professionally, just so that you know who you're working with, who I am, and that you're in good hands. And so, even with a friend from university or something like that, that person might know me in the context of playing intramural sports. They might know me in the context of going out for beers with the guys. They don't know exactly what I'm capable of or what I've accomplished in my real estate career. So just because they know I'm a realtor, it doesn't necessarily mean that they know that I'm the best possible realtor available for them. So I want to make sure they know that. As I said earlier, it's really priming the pump for them to be comfortable signing off on the paperwork at the end of the presentation. And it's also creating the right mindset with your clients that they are, going to be ready, willing, and able to follow and trust all of your opinions. So that's huge. We don't want to have debates with our clients about their objections or about them having skepticism of your suggestions. We want them to say, okay, Mr. or Mrs. Realtor, you know what you're doing. I trust your opinion. Let's do it. Now, once I've introduced myself, I like to get personal with the client. So I have a series of questions that I want to ask them about, who they are, what their goals are, what their game plans are. So, these are what we typically call our qualifying questions. So we ask them, why are you moving? Where do you need to move to next? How much money do you want to net out of the house? What do you plan on using the money for? How soon does this house need to be on the market? How fast do you want to sell the property? I also ask them, like, what is this move going to do for your lifestyle? This is a nice house. You're moving out of it for a reason. What are you hoping to achieve? What upgrade? What change? What movement in your life is happening? Because that information is very, very valuable, especially if your client's in a position where they might feel a little bit scared or apprehensive. A good example of that is, it's 6 months from now. It took a lot longer to sell their house than you initially anticipated. They finally have an offer. It's lower than they wanted, but heck, you know what? At least we're going to get this property sold. And they're apprehensive because it's a little bit less than they wanted. It's a great opportunity. To remind them that, hey, you know what? This isn't as much money as we wanted, but the big picture here is that we're moving because of, X, Y, Z. And so, it's very useful information because it helps them make their decision when, is that $5,000 really worth being stuck in a neighborhood where your kids don't really want to go to school? Like, yeah, big picture, this is about the family. $5,000 isn't the biggest part of this decision. Let's do it. Let's move on. So if you don't get personal and talk to them about what the important factors are, then you're not going to be able to, use that information to help guide them along the way later on. Question was, will I share all this stuff? Absolutely. There's going to be all kinds of great resources shared at the end of the presentation. So the next thing I get into is pricing strategy discussion. And the reason it's so important to discuss pricing strategy before, as you can see, the CMA is 0.6, we're on 0.3. The reason it's important to discuss pricing early on is because you don't want to have a debate with your client about what price to list their property for. So you want to talk about the importance of pricing strategy before price is on the table. That way, instead of setting yourself up for what could potentially be a debate or an objection handle or something like that, you're just real talking with them about the logistics and the good common sense of why good pricing gets properties sold. Now, this is going to be different market to market. In Edmonton, Alberta, for example, we are going to be looking at a buyer's market. So prices are lower, days on market times are longer, you have to price accordingly. Conversely, in Vancouver, it's a bit more of a seller's market. So we're pricing for bidding wars and managing bidding wars appropriately. So it's all about educating your clients so that they understand why pricing properly is important, and so that they understand that your professional advice on pricing is advice that needs to be followed. Next, we talk about staging and preparation. So I always talk about making sure the house is photo ready. I find the majority of my clients, their houses aren't necessarily staged in a way that's appropriate for taking high quality photos for the listing. But I also am not here to be offending people, because nobody lives necessarily like their house is a show home. So I don't say your house is messy or untidy, because everybody's house is a little messy and untidy. Life happens. You've got kids, you've got pets, you're coming and going. I mean, if you saw my apartment this morning before I left, I said, to heck with it. I'll deal with some of this tidying when I get home. That's natural. So that's okay for living life day to day, but it's not okay for taking the perfect listing photos to maximize your exposure on the marketplace. So this is, again, where I educate them on the importance of staging and preparation, it gives you the opportunity to show off your professional knowledge and expertise, and it shows them that you can bring value to this listing presentation because your objective is to get maximum dollar for their property. And this is the one way that's in the client's control on how they can participate to get their client ready, or their property ready for top dollar. So, you know, sometimes a property needs professional staging, maybe if it's a vacant property, but for the most part, you know, you just give regular people in their regular houses advice on how to tidy up some clutter, make their interior decor a little bit more minimal, put away the personal photos, etc., etc. So we just talk about that. Next, we tour the home. So a lot of people start with touring the home, but notice the philosophy here is that you give value and build expertise before you engage in the sales part of the process. So what have I done? Number one, introduce myself, built value, displayed my expertise, gotten personal. Again, building value by showing the client that I'm here for them, their needs, and I'm willing to listen. Pricing strategy discussion, setting expectations, building professional knowledge and value, staging and preparation, helping set expectations, building professional knowledge and value. I haven't actually done anything that looks like a sale yet. So you're laying a very, very strong and powerful foundation for a client who is ready and willing to follow your advice, and who is ready and willing to you choose you as a realtor. Do I do this at the table or standing up? I usually like to sit down at the dining room table, or wherever a good sitting spot is. Sometimes we're reclining in the living room. I like to do it at a table because the second half of the presentation, you really want to have your laptop open with your clients looking at the laptop with you. If the property is unfurnished, vacant, or whatever, then I just pull the laptop up at the kitchen counter or the island, depending on the layout of the home. So I tour the home. We go around the home. I ask them to tell me about anything that's been upgraded, changed, improved. I also make sure that I say, hey, realistically, we're going to need to talk about any deficiencies in the property, so I need to know about those as well. I make notes. If there's anything particularly noteworthy, I take pictures. I actually, nowadays, more so just take pictures than notes. I tell my clients, these aren't the glamour shots that we're going to use for your listing, but a picture is worth 1,000 words. So instead of madly scribbling in my notebook, I just like to have pictures to review back to when I'm at the office if I need to remember something. Next, we sit down and we do our CMA. So the way that I do the CMA is I don't like coming ready with listings or a pre-done CMA because I haven't seen the house yet. I don't really know what I'm working with. So while I might know what the most likely comparables that I'm going to use are, I really don't know where this property is going to fit in that range. The second thing I really like about this way of doing a CMA is it creates an added layer of transparency with the client. I basically say, like, look, instead of just printing a bunch of comparables that I think might apply to your property, that will help build the narrative of me pricing the property at what I came in predetermined to price it at. I'm showing you the same data that realtors can see. I'm showing you every single property that could affect your property's home, and we're going to go through it together. So I actually open up my MLS portal. I put in the search criteria. I narrow it down to the properties that are closest with their property. And then we go through the properties together until we find the ones that are closest in value and lock in a price. I find this is also a very powerful tool because if the client's being a little bit unreasonable with their pricing, you can literally hold up your laptop and say, okay, look at the picture of the kitchen on my screen for this house that's worth, $500,000. And now let's look at your kitchen. This kitchen's brand new. Your kitchen's original. So can you try to help me understand why, this kitchen that's worth $30,000 more, why your house is worth the same as that without a kitchen like that? The thing is, people are all reasonable and all intelligent. And when given, tangible information that they can work with and assess, 95% of the time, I find my clients end up at the conclusion of the price for their property that I would have come up with anyways. But when they take ownership of that process and you guide them through it and the price is their idea, then it's a lot easier for them to say yes to listing to that price. Now, the objection that I do sometimes run into is, yeah, I know my house is worth, 500, but I really need 550. What can we do about that? That's a different set of objections to handle, but that's a much easier objection to handle than somebody just quite clearly thinking their house is worth more than it is for arbitrary reasons. So once we get our price locked in, then I sit down and I talk about my marketing plan. Now, this says your marketing plan because every agent's going to market properties a little bit differently. I like to show off our marketing plan via show and tell. Again, I've got my laptop open. We log into our Facebook business account and we show them the back analytics of how we advertise properties. I show them our website. I show them our newsletter, et cetera, et cetera. So I show them all the stuff that we're going to do. Typically, I show them a couple of previous listings as well, simply because it's, again, showing them what we do to get properties sold. It's a snapshot of our body of work. So from there, we customize a marketing plan based on how quickly they want to sell their property. If they want to sell the property quick, we know that a more aggressive price with more rapid fire marketing is going to be effective. If they're not in a rush, you know, a slightly higher price to test the market might be acceptable with a longer marketing cycle. So we're not necessarily here to talk about the specifics of a marketing plan for a listing, but know that this is the part where you do talk about your marketing plan based on what you're going to do to list and sell that property. Next, we take action. So remember, let's circle back to the start of the presentation. We are here at this property to earn this business. That's what we're here to do. So we sit down and I say, okay, now that we have our marketing plan, now that we know our price, let's talk about our action plan. I open up my calendar and I say, when are we going to book the photos? When are we going to book the first open house? What day do we want to be live on the market? What day are we going to do our first social media blitz? We actually plan out the action that's going to happen. And I say, okay, great. We've got an action plan. We know what's going to happen. Let's go through the formality of signing off on the paperwork. And at that point, if you have nailed this presentation, the paperwork is a complete formality. It feels as natural and as, you know, non-contentious as signing off on the user agreement when you download an app that you just skim through and click OK. No idea what's in it. You want to use the service, you sign off on it. So that's the level of casualness that I want to go through the paperwork when I do a listing presentation. I basically breeze through it. I say, this is what each section means. This is the commission. We charge pretty typical market commission. You know, fill it all out, sign off on it. Now, of course, we're going to get objections from time to time, and we're going to get pushback. However, 95% of the time, my clients sign off, even at the commission portion, and there's really no objection and no pushback. And that's the way that you want the listing presentation to go. That's why we load up the beginning of the presentation, building so much credibility and establishing so much value, because we want the end of the presentation to be a formality. Now, the last little piece I'll put in here is that if the client doesn't want to be on the market for 2 or 3 months, I still want to sign the contract. I just put a date in the contract for the on-market date to represent when they actually want it on the market. But I don't want to let this thing hang and give them an opportunity to interview other realtors and potentially lose that business. I want to earn the business on the spot. So I see some questions coming through, but I also see participants answering the questions. So that's fabulous. Thank you. Presentation resources. So whether you have everything we just talked about as a printed material, a slide deck, or online resources, you really just want to have these key elements available in your listing presentation. My style, I utilize the online resources. I show up with an agenda, and everything I discussed, we have available as a online resource that we can look at. Previous listings, our website, our Facebook, etc. Now, for whatever reason, if we don't earn the business on the spot, this is where we get to post-presentation. For those of you who know Phil Hahn here in Canada, he's one of the more well-known EXP agents. He always says the fortune is in the follow-up, and he's absolutely right. If you complete a listing presentation and don't earn the business on the spot, do not sit around hoping and praying that your client will just call you back and spontaneously say, yes, I want to list the house. Follow up with them, be persistent, let them know that you're serious about being their agent and that you're serious about earning the business. And close the deal. Now, closing quite literally just means asking for the sale. So when you follow up, don't just limp into the conversation saying, hey, so how's it going? call the conversation and say, hey, how's it going? I hope you had some time to think about the presentation, and I just wanted to check in and see if you're ready to take the next step so that we can get your house on the market. Ask them to proceed. And if they aren't ready for whatever reason, have a conversation about what needs to happen to increase their comfort level. And that are the elements of a listing presentation. So the giveaway that we're going to do, this is the agenda that I use for my listing presentation. So in the chat window, I am going to link to the slide deck for this presentation, as well as that meeting agenda. And then while I'm doing that, we can open up the floor to some questions. Okay, link to the slide deck coming in hot. Hi there. Here, why don't I answer the first set of questions first so that we don't get too far ahead of ourselves. So the answer to your question is, do I come up with a price on the spot? Yes. But in the preparation for the listing, I've already looked at their neighborhood and I know what the price range should be. So you should be able to pinpoint the price within about 5% above or below what their property probably should be worth. So at least you're coming in with some preparation. But in that meeting, again, once we've seen that house and we can cross-reference the houses that are in that range, that's when we can pinpoint the price that's right for them. In terms of pricing strategy and what makes sense for their specific property, typically it's all market dependent. So a seller's market is going to perform differently than a buyer's market. And then, whether you're going for a bidding war or a quick sale, it's all about, the simple philosophy is the faster you want it sold, the lower the price. The higher, the more you're willing to wait, the higher the price. In a bidding war, you really want to make sure that if to get a bidding war, you price it slightly below market to get people's attention because they're going to think it's a good deal. That'll attract a lot of buyers, and then multiple buyers will bid the property. And then you had a couple of questions about staging. Mm-hmm. Uh, so staging costs are market dependent. In our market here in Canada, it's actually usually more typical that the clients pay for any initial renovations or staging costs to their property. So if it's more typical in your marketplace that the agent pays for costs of staging, then I think you can propose to your client that that it's their investment and that the staging might help them get top dollar, and you show them return on investment. Say, hey, you know what? Typically, stage properties in our marketplace, you'd have to do the research, of course, but in most marketplaces, stage properties sell for a little bit higher than unstaged properties. So you can show them for a couple $1,000s invested in staging, you can expect, several more $1,000s in sale price, which will really be helpful. Of course, you run the risk that they may select a realtor that does include staging, but to create a competitive advantage, maybe you offer, a small commission discount to help offset the cost of the staging. Okay, so the next question is, what if the property across the street is on a body of water worth $2 million and the client starts with no water, has water views, and wants to list at a higher price? So the initial answer to the question is, if I, after talking to this client, do not think they are willing to list their property for a sellable price, or if they are listing too high initially, if they are unwilling to look at price reductions as part of their strategy, even though it's exciting to get a $2 million listing, that might actually turn into a several $1,000s money pit and a ton of your time and a deteriorated relationship with the client, because the property just simply isn't going to sell. So, the extreme version of that is sometimes I tell clients, like, hey, you know what, why don't you try with an agent at a higher price for a little bit, and then I'll get back to you in 90 days. And I call them at day 85 and say, hey, I noticed you haven't sold yet. How about time for a different approach? So that would be, that would be kind of how I would handle that. Let's see here. Is it ever too early to coming soon listing? Oh, if a client wanted to sell in March 2021, I would have a signed listing agreement right now with them. Again, you always want to have your paperwork signed as early as possible. Part of the narrative that might really help with that is just say, like, hey, leading up to the sale, I want to pre-market it to client or to realtors in my brokerage. I want to give you staging advice. I want to do some pre-marketing. And so let's get this business relationship started so that I can start potentially selling your home. And, depending on your marketplace, there may be an opportunity to have that home sold before it's even time to put it on the market. Okay, let's see here. Yep, please go ahead. Yeah, I would say that's a much more complex question. And so I would say, typically you're going to want to, with our listings, our marketing investment is anywhere from about $500 to $1,000 as a quick answer to the question. And in terms of tools that are available and what type of marketing you should do, that's a more in-depth conversation. I'd recommend reaching out to your mentor through EXP so that they can kind of show you the specifics of exactly how to do that. Because my idea here with this presentation is this is the skeleton of the resources you need, but the specifics, that's going to be a little more one-on-one time with your mentor to get that built out. How do you overcome the objection of a seller asking to add your commission on top of market value of the property? I'm not exactly sure. Okay, so the pricing strategy is that the client wants to earn market value for their property, and they want your commission to be over and above that, so that in order for you to get paid, you have to sell the property for higher than market. Yeah, that's not really a commission strategy I've seen in my marketplace. But basically, it's educating the client that market price of the property involves transaction fees. So you can't make the property worth more to cover your transaction fees. It's similarly to the legal fees of conveyancing the deal. So that objection, I've actually never even heard of a client proposing something like that. But I would talk to the client and say, look, we can start with an initial price of that, but know that my commission is a percentage of the final sale price. So if selling for higher than market doesn't work, and we end up selling for market, that my commission is going to come out of that as a percentage. Next, how would you price a home on a busy commercial street with no comparables anywhere on the same street? So this is a great question because it can be tricky to do a comparative market analysis when there aren't similar comparables anywhere nearby. If you live in a large municipality, which that's the markets that we do business in are typically this large, I look for comparable streets in comparable neighborhoods in different parts of the city. That's a bit of a trickier one, but for example, and if let's say that you're on the south side of the city and they have their property on the north side of the city, and there's no properties anywhere on the north side of the city that work, but there's a bunch of comparable properties in comparable neighborhoods on the south side of the city. Even though they're geographically very far, they're still quite similar. So that takes a lot more research. So doing the market analysis takes more time. So I would make sure I did some of that prep work. And that's why it's important to be prepared when you come, so that you're not just pulling up comparables for the first time in front of your client and then, oops, there isn't one that makes sense to talk about. Do you bring a cost sheet to the listing presentation or provide in the pre-presentation? If so, do we have one with an EXP logo? So I think a cost sheet is basically the net sheet, which means you take the sale price and you deduct from it the commission, transaction costs, et cetera, et cetera. I typically do that math with my client in the presentation. I just use the calculator app on my laptop and say, hey, this is about how much, if our sale price is this is what you're going to net out. In my experience, that the clients can do the math on their own. So I just walk them through how to do the math, and then they can play with it based on the different sale price variations, once they're contemplating it. So do I use one? I personally don't, but if you wanted to grab the EXP logo and create one in Microsoft Word, that would just take you a couple minutes. Okay, I'm going to get into the next piece here. You can still ask questions while I'm introducing this, but it is, we do want to get the survey filled out. Again, it helps the ICON program develop better and better courses for everybody to utilize and enjoy. It just improves the experience of the entire EXP University and ultimately helps us drive more value to each and every one of the agents. So please do take a minute to fill out the survey. There's the link. It really helps EXP University create more content and better content for each and every one of you. And that's our goal. We want to help and empower everybody to be the best agents that they can